All right, we are coming back with another Off the Record on the Rocks. Cheers to you.
Cheers, baby.
My friend and co-host, Ankarina Lara. We are coming off of all-time highs after taking a little bit of a hiatus here from the show. Most of June, in fact, taking the summer to kind of ease our way in. We've got a lot to cover. We've got a lot to talk about, especially everything that we called here on the show, everything around all-time highs, timing, the crypto legislation making its way this week here in Washington, D.C., being dubbed Crypto Week, and the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, all of this stuff going now to Donald Trump's desk for signature, creating the setup here for a new market conditions, which will now include cryptocurrencies of all kinds. We got a lot to get to here as we head into the middle of July.
I mean, look, we talked about buying in May and going away, coming back in June, and guess what? We're now in July. We're counting. Hey, the buck moon came alongside all-time highs. You know, we said to everybody, this is actually financial advice. You should probably buy and just wait, because if there is a week that will make, who knows, will this week become an annual thing? Maybe every year we'll have a crypto week that they'll talk about in the government, because that has started galvanizing everyone to just move towards buy. And we're at all-time highs. What was the all-time high at 123 and 100 or something like that for Bitcoin?
Touched 123. I mean, the best analysis I'm looking at is this week's not over.
It's not over.
24/7, so don't sell it short. And Ethereum still underperforming, and that signal of Bitcoin topping, Ethereum beginning to boost. It's all relevant here to a couple of thoughts on the crypto week and the coordination and the timing and the buck moon literally on the day reaching all-time highs this week.
Grab a drink. It's time for another episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarina Lara as we discuss the latest in all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double.
You've got news coming from Coinbase. They've redesigned the Base app, the Base wallet, and they've relaunched it. And Brian Armstrong and Jesse Pollack are out there making waves with Gary Vaynerchuk taking the stage alongside the Coinbase guys, talking about day one, a new day, they called it. And I've been talking about here on the show, everything's getting remixed. Everything's getting reborn. New markets are being created. All of that narrative that we've been uncovering, it's no coincidence that it all collides as the regulation is coming through, as the clarity around these NFT markets. I mean, I just said Gary Vaynerchuk. He's out there talking about VFriends and collectibles out of one side, and then taking the stage with Coinbase to talk about the custody and self-custody of Bitcoin for brands. It's just no coincidence that a new product launch from somebody like Coinbase. You've got Robinhood making news, actually, I think, beating some of this regulation to the market by just going out there and saying, we're going to offer fractionalized stocks to our customers, whether or not they're in the United States or not, because they're not buying a security.
It's not a security. It's a tokenization that we talked about. And, like we always know, the vernacular will change because everyone tries to see what sticks. Tokenization as a word is underlying everything you just said, from the fractional ownership of something to those crazy NFTs that Gary Vee was pushing for a while. It's always about the tokenization of, quote, the asset, often the real world asset, but in this case, tokenization of digital assets with Robinhood. But that's never going to stick. What is sticking, and like you said, Gary Vee, talk about a guy who knows how to be right place, right time, aligning himself now with Brian Armstrong and Coinbase, which we know is effectively an apparatus of the federal government. They are the ones who are sued and not sued and countersuing and suing the SEC, the CFTC, all these guys.
Whatever the deal is,
it's already done. But now the words that are going to be starting to be pushed out, probably not the word tokenization is what we and your parents and my parents and everyone who's in the older generations will ever know. But this idea of the reset, the day one, a new wallet. What's the concept? Let's start using words, hey, everybody, that Americans just understand. You have a wallet in your pocket. Well, now you have a wallet on your phone. Well, haven't I had a wallet on my phone all this time? Well, yeah, that's the Apple wallet. Now you have a crypto wallet. Oh, of course. And it just starts to slowly make more and more sense. And to do it during a week, you know, the DC Buzz is like the crypto week, and the acts, the three bills that are being discussed. Let's just use words that everyone can get behind. How about, God, what's been one of the biggest problems right now in the market? Well, there's been a lack of clarity. Aha. I have this bill called the Clarity Act. Oh, that's perfect. And then, you know, I've felt like everybody's been just a little bit behind in understanding things. Well, we have a Genius Act because we're all geniuses now. Oh, and are you familiar with this notion of CBDCs? What does that stand for? Oh, no, forget all that. Stable coins, stable dollar, stable coin, stable act. It's just, I feel like there's someone on a train just feeding me coal with a shovel and just saying, pump harder, we're going to get up the whole hill.
Yeah, look,
and it's so simple.
The Genius stands for, as we know they love to do, guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. stable coins. That is the GENIUS, guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. stable coins. This, you know, literally while we're here in the past several hours, it passed the Senate Banking Committee in March. It passed through the House today. This is the bill. Then again, side by side, I'm reading here from the United States Banking Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. It also talks about the Genius Act, which is led by and co-sponsored from Gillibrand and Loomis, and the same names that we saw talking at the Coinbase conference a year ago about these regulations and the need for this clarity in the market and to make America this innovation hub around crypto. It's why I think, you know, to somebody who's just now paying attention, who's just now seeing, oh, crypto's it's mainstream, it's in my wallet, it's totally normal now, and then to have this reassurance that it is no longer illegal, that it is no longer fear of your company being held in liability against the SEC for trading an unregistered security. Like, that was the premise,
and removing
stuff, and it's gone.
And removing the limit, like removing the specter of fear of, well, if I buy a PlayStation with 3 controllers, it'll be $650. And then I'll have to tell the government on my taxes that I transacted in digital assets for more than $600. Like, there's no more artificial ceilings either. And the word stable in the example of stable coin is what everyone wants to hear, right? Like, when you go to talk to your broker, they say, well, we have high risk opportunities. We have some stable growth ones. Oh, I like stable growth.
I think there's a couple of things we got to pull a thread in and move this conversation forward, because I know we could sit here and talk about all the stuff we called, but what comes next? If we're on this so good, I start to look at, I saw something from Vivek Ramaswamy at the Bitcoin, or maybe it was at Token 2049. I forget which conference he was speaking at, but he was talking specifically about the national debt issue, and who better to be out there as the spokesperson, this math whiz, this guy who knows the numbers, and he's showing compound interest. You're starting to hear this idea of giving. He even talked about it in the speech. He was like, if we gave every newborn American $10,000 and we put it in an account, and it, earned interest, compound interest over the next 30 years, by the time they're 45 years old, they'll have $1 million in their bank account, or whatever the compound math he was showing.
Yeah.
And that narrative will be the thing that adds fuel to this regulatory clarity. Now that the base layer has been set, we already know BlackRock's been piling it in. We already heard that Bitcoin and these ETFs are going to start showing up in retirement 401ks. Why would they not? And what else do we need to take care of? We need to take care of the national debt. How are we going to get out of that debt? Well, we're going to need some other mechanism, some non-inflationary asset to help us pay down this debt. And you're starting to hear, MicroStrategy. We haven't talked about Mr. Saylor today, but he single-handedly, was driving this strong narrative in June, but he's saying the honest part out loud. He's telling you, buy it every day. Buy it when it's at 100,000 and buy it when it's at 1 million. It is always going up. And when you start to understand the mechanics of that, and now this smoothing that we've talked about here that can happen because of this derivative market and being able to play both sides of the core asset and the derivatives, not financial advice, seems relevant. The other thing I'll say, we haven't talked about Apple, but something that did slip through here in the past couple of weeks is that Apple approved its first iOS game integration that features a native Bitcoin microtransaction. This is from July 9th. Apple approves Sarutobi. I've not heard of this game. To return to the Apple Store with the integrated Bitcoin Lightning payments. That should ring a bell if you listen to the show. And who else is building on Lightning? Jack Dorsey and Block, and he came out with another new messaging app. Anyway, I'm conflating a lot of things, but Apple allowing Bitcoin, it's now in your wallet. The regulatory framework is set. The big guys are all positioned, and Vivek's out there talking about let's make everybody wealthy, not just the individual Americans, I believe, but actually paying down the debt. How do you actually get rich? You have no debt. And so how is America going to do that? I think we're going to pay it off with Solana.
Look, kudos for that. That brought us around the world and back again. That was great because everything you just described is a very Bitcoin-centric focused way the world works. There's always been people talking about the debt, but no one with an actual math background who can show you the path forward. How do you make Americans all empowered to take control of their destiny? Their 401ks and their 403bs are broken. The idea of a social net, Medicare, Medicaid, even for medicine, like all these things are antiquated. The idea of Social Security broken. So how do you start when someone's born and start earning them forward? All makes great sense. The thing that's also on the side of that, which I'll say, because we were trying to pull the thread back with some stablecoin talk, is it was at the Bitcoin conference that the Vice President JD Vance got up there, and he was early in the talk about stablecoins being a very strategic part of this new crypto strategy, because if we all agree that Bitcoin is a non-renewable resource that has a finite amount that will over time, become less and less available, then we know we have something that's quite rare, and people can understand conceptually how that works in terms of the supply and demand. But stable coins are a lot harder to understand. And if you're aligning it with the dollar and trying to figure out, well, how does USDC and USDT and all these things that have US in front of a couple other letters are all in this category of, quote, stable coins, well, that's not going to play. The American public doesn't understand. There's going to be a digital dollar twin. There's going to have to be an easy way to articulate that. So I think part of what Ramaswamy and others are trying to do is just actually get away from the stablecoin conversation. I actually think, to bring back to the Trump administration and what they're doing, is if the stable coins are going to somehow, some way be associated with banks, remember the origin of a stable coin or the competitors in the same breath were these things called CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, right? Well, the current administration, it would seem to me, who's big on buying up, mining rigs and investing in companies that are mining Bitcoin, at the same time running meme coins on Solana for both Donald Trump and Melania Trump, for trying to do DeFi products with his sons or whatever. They're all in on crypto. So why would they want to give any part of the federal apparatus autonomy to create value or restrict value as it pertains to crypto? And everything about stablecoin and what the CBDCs used to be, to me, says eventually restrictions, because it has to tie a digital twin to a dollar. If you're tying something to the dollar, then by definition, you're in the fiat land of the bankers who really don't want. Again, these are the guys, when Trump, after his first term, got out of the White House, they were basically coming after his entire family, trying to freeze all of his assets.
right.
Remember, they were trying to like do these lawsuits to prevent access to wealth. So if you're now the president again, and you know what all those banks did, I think you might spend the balance of your term and to do whatever protections you can into the next, whoever it is, to be like, okay, we're going to create so much value that we will nerf the Federal Reserve and any central bank's ability to undercut or to seize or to do anything with that. So to get to your point, you're talking about creating new markets this week. Crypto Week is creating like 3 bills.
Yeah.
We're talking. Think about how slow the last 6 years have been with any specific guidance, and now we have these 3 sweeping bills that all in 1 week. That I don't even think half the people who are even listed as being part of the committees understand fully what they're doing. They don't understand the nuance. We're talking like brand new markets.
17 minutes
buy signals.
17 minutes ago, this is the American Bankers Association, the ABA, applauds House passage of Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act. So we applaud today's House passage of the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act and thank Majority Whip Tom Emmer and the bill's 135 co-sponsors for their leadership. ABA believes strongly that a CBDC is unnecessary in the United States and would present unacceptable risks and costs to the financial system. Issuance of a CBDC would fundamentally change the relationship between citizens and the Federal Reserve, undermine the important role banks play in extending credit, and exacerbate economic and liquidity crises, and impede the transmission of sound monetary policy. We urge the Senate to move quickly to pass the companion legislation introduced by Senator Ted Cruz. So, yeah, these bills are
I didn't read that, but I just more or less described what's about to happen. And you know what? We could even be crazier. Like, think about the current administration's desire to lean
have to play ball now with crypto. If they don't get a CBDC, they have to play ball now.
But think about how their priority of thinning out, the doging of so many things, the offloading of, and these are their words, the offloading of the burden of big government to have all these regulatory committees and budgets and things. And what do they like to do? They like to kick things down to the state level. Now, we already know, when we last recorded, I want to say we were at, was it 14 or 16 states had their own version of a sovereign wealth fund? Texas, when we last recorded, was creating its own stock market, right? And then so now I'm seeing that, talk about reading some tea leaves here.
Decentralization, baby.
Decentralization, because guess what? As long as it's on the ledger, you can decentralize it. So if we have gigantic economies like California and Texas and Florida, hashtag Civil War the movie, you should probably go see it because it's playing out, is we have autonomy to build our own wealth. Will it be called California coin or whatever? Who knows? But there will be abilities for you as a citizen of a state and the state level regulation to manage that. And guess what? The current administration would probably love that, because then the feds can't come get your damn meme coin money because you have to deal with your state. And guess where the state is that homeboy files taxes? Florida. He's trying to run New York, but he's not messing with that Southern District of New York.
No.
Just go to Mar-a-Lago and count the damn Bitcoin.
My mind is going for real and it's where I was trying to take this of, the long term here, the next year, 2 years, but I'm looking at the next 5 and the next 10 of these new markets that get created, how it shows up in everyday Americans' bank accounts, 401ks, or whatever this new, Trump savings account is that every American's going to get. What the banks are going to have to do in order to participate in the crypto markets, all of these different ETF products that are happening. And I don't know where to connect these dots, but it seems really relevant to me in this. We haven't talked about Google and this kind of crazy acquisition with Windsurf, but I'll try to connect the dots of deregulation and trying to get through red tape And when I talk about new markets that get created and new revitalization and reinvention, we knew this was coming. But the swallowing up of all of these AI startups and all this new AI talent and what is going to drive all of this innovation using blockchain and artificial intelligence, right, as the truth layer.
It is. No, now you're on it. Now I can smell it.
And so these companies, Google in this case, instead of going through a traditional acquisition of a new
traditional product, they went with a derivative product.
They just bought the person.
By the people, because you can tokenize the product. It's exactly the mirror. You're on it.
Yeah.
Google went to Windsurf and said, well, we could acquire Windsurf, the security. Windsurf, the ETF. They said, no. We're going to create a derivative product called the CEO and the Tiger team of 4 developer gangsters. And we're going to tokenize that. And then we're going to...
That's the one I want to buy.
We're going to buy that tokenized partial ownership, but we're still going to put exposure into Windsurf and invest in that. And we'll call our friends over at Cognition and say, hey, you guys want to buy Windsurf on a song? Because we pull out the real value, you just buy the debt and then pay off these other 200 nerds. And then you get a fractionalized version of Windsurf. And by the way, we'll still pay you your recurring revenue monthly, but you just don't get to hang out with the C-suite.
And no red tape. And no red tape intervention and no chance of any, antitrust rules, no regulators coming in and looking at whether or not this creates some sort of additional monopoly. You
can't have a monopoly if all you own is derivatives based on the way the rules work.
Look, I think I'm reading this from TechCrunch. Windsurf CEO goes to Google and OpenAI's acquisition falls apart. This is dirty out there, but I do think that it is very much related to these concepts of the changing market dynamics, how the money is moving, how companies are being formed. And here's another one that I think we should start to pay attention to. I'm seeing a couple of startups pop up that are now allowing founders to effectively crowdfund fractional ownership, like the traditional VC market. Now, I mean, this has kind of been happening with
a derivative on the VC market, undercutting Sand Hill Road. That's wild.
Exactly. So if you've got an idea, you've built a ChatGPT wrapper, being able to go to this kind of marketplace where people can put money in and bet. Now you see where I'm going on this. Invest, but we're not going to call it that because they're just buying a token. It's not a security, but you could, as the owner of that company, now create a cap table. Whether or not you know them or not, but the cap table could be just a bunch of wallet addresses who have locked up their money in your account with some expectation, some reasonable expectation that they're going to get paid out. But the regulation around that, this is where that Clarity Act becomes very interesting to me, of who's regulating what's a commodity, what's a security, and that's where that Clarity Act gives the clarification. And now we've tied back the regulation market with the banks, the changing dynamic, to the heating up of these new derivative acquisitions. That it's not a traditional, it's a remix. It is.
But it's like, so I think of it as, I got a new idea for a startup. Okay, I'm now taking the concept of Kickstarter, I'm applying it to the concept of a derivative market on securities, which is now has precedent, is well established. They're allowing, back to Robinhood, tokenizing bundles of crypto with SEC regulated securities, traditional stocks, into other packages. Let's not talk Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac collapse and subprime mortgages being bundled in tranches. Go watch The Big Short. It'll explain all that. But you kind of see how it's like, well, what is this tranche of stuff I'm tokenizing from Robinhood? Is it all A plus crypto, or is some Crow in there and some XRP and some ADA, some garbage? Who cares? The crypto market goes up and up and up. As long as it's going up, it has a dip. Will those things be worth anything? Who knows? But if I want to crowdfund my new startup, I take the Kickstarter example, I put up a cap table. We're doing it all with a smart contract on the ledger so everyone can see, not a bait and switch. It's publicly available if you look on the ledger.
Right.
I already have 20 individuals. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But if I get 40 individuals, I've already promised as part of the smart contract, we'll create a DAO. And now I have a board, a virtual board, who are my first initial investors. And now I've tokenized it and given partial ownership. And I've done that 100% around the traditional VC system. I've done it outside of lawyers or having
Banking
the banking system, and I am moving that value, and I'm giving. I can give dividends. I can give dividends. I can do a derivative version of a dividend. So you get a tokenized slice of our dividend, and all it does is hit your wallet, and you get a push notification saying, "Hey, thank you so much for believing in Off the Record on the Rocks.ai, our new company. Every month you get back $10, and we're giving it to you in ETH. We're giving it to you in Satoshis."
Yep.
And then you can watch it grow. And you're taking the other piece, which is the staking product. Staking has been that thing that was, everyone loved it. It was the underpinnings, no pun intended, of DeFi.
Yeah.
So now it's Kickstarter, tokenized derivatives, a cap table on the public ledger, smart contract, and a staking mechanism. And it's 100% transparent. The only thing that's not transparent is who are the humans who are involved, because all you see is OX addresses, but you can see how much money is moving or how much value is moving.
Yeah.
Dude, we need to start a company. We should start a company right now. And have our listeners invest in it.
Well, I think it goes to, look, we can get there, and I'm going to stick on those betting markets, and I'm going to talk about that real time, always on market. And all of a sudden, if there's tokenization and fractionalization of a company that can be bought and sold and swapped on markets, at will 24/7, and you don't know who these people are, it makes it pretty volatile for you as the owner, unless you are, maybe you do know who these people are, but you're building it still in the blockchain. At the end of the day, you have got to be creating value. And I look at that, and I look at that in the generative AI world and all the jobs that are going away. And one of the things we talked about when we started this show, I think this is episode 111, 111, baby, a new E1, is by simply doing it, by simply the act of creating what we are creating, studying what we are studying, learning and reading about what we are talking about, we are creating value. Now the mechanisms with which to value and quantify that value and buy and sell that value are now becoming available to us as creators. And I think that is a long way around, but it does to me, yes, I'm with you, of like, anytime you create something and you share it and you put it out to the world, and I'm not just talking about social media, I'm talking about you texting your friends, anytime you're creating value, you're sharing some piece of knowledge, there's going to be a way with which you could earn from that, and that's the flippening of the internet.
that's actually the flippening. What you just described. Now I can see it really clearly. So we've just talked about the flippening. For those listeners who don't understand the flippening, it goes back to when you look at the top 10, top 20 cryptocurrency lists of, market cap and, number of tokens out. When one would jump to another slot, pushing the other one down, you'd say it was a flippening, right? Ethereum was flipped by Tron or by whatever. So what we're saying is, in this context, is these derivative markets are creating a flippening effect within those traditional markets, right? So tokenizations of assets and bundling things is a flippening of what was a traditional derivatives market. You can create a bunch of futures of stocks. Well, okay, that's a cool derivative, but I have a new way of thinking about it, tokenizing that. So playing that idea of the flippening of a traditional business model. I don't need all the people and all the red tape and all the bureaucracy to actually create a company and create value. I've done a flippening of what Sand Hill Road, the famous road in California where all the VCs are. They're the ones you had to go to and beg and kiss boots and try to get someone to invest. That's where Facebook went. That's where Uber went. That's where Twitter went. All those guys. Now the game was, hey, new VCs play roulette. We'll give you $100,000 on 10 things. It's still betting blindly. The flippening is saying, no. We're only paying where real value is being generated. We're not actually making these bets on these future things that quote might happen. We're actually making bets on things that are happening right now. So where I'm headed is the flippening, the next big flippening, influencers. Influencers right now have this chokehold on brand marketing, on moving eyeballs across apps and across the internet. Mr. Beast goes and says something and people go buy his candy bars. Mark Rober goes and makes an obstacle course for squirrels and everyone goes and buys squirrel food so they can play that thing in the backyard. Kardashian wears Skechers and shows her butt on Twitter a few times. Everybody wants to have Skechers, right? We all understand influence. It's based on followers and likes and based on walled social networks. I'm talking a derivative version of influence, because value will be created by all these people in mass who might actually be anonymous, but their energy in a derivative tokenized version of influence supersedes likes and supersedes following and supersedes the social networks that they are available on, because they will be for real omni-channel, and omni-channel by definition will have to be tokenized, because it's not going to be done doing deals with all the networks. It'll be done by doing deals with the humans on the internet and their digital twins who are interested in following things.
Follow this logic, and I'm going to bring us all the way around to the Coldplay Kiss Cam CEO, Andy Byron, and his alleged affair with the HR chief of his company, which is when we talk about this truth layer that's being created in this derivative market, and what you just described as kind of this difference between knowing what's the AI created and who are the humans that are creating this value, the origin, the point of origin. We've talked about that provenance becomes important, where something originates. Even if it's a derivative, you got to know where the derivative came from. If it's a derivative of a derivative of a derivative. But when it comes to real humans, in this scenario playing out in the Kalshi live markets, the derivative markets where you can bet on anything of whether or not this guy is going to resign, Andy Byron, whether or not getting caught is enough to whether or not he will resign in July, I think is the specific bet. And I think about that. And I think about this idea of the truth layer. And now all of a sudden you can bet on this actual thing, these actual humans that I don't know. I don't know who they are. I don't know this woman. I don't know this guy. But I know that there are now millions of people, hundreds of millions of people on the internet who have an opinion, who have a thought, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're betting on what they believe to be the right thing. Just like we've talked about betting on elections, just like we saw play out in this most recent election with Polymarket. And this is where things get very interesting to me, is because of that anonymity, right? If you had enough money, you could buy the truth. You could take the other side of that bet, and you could drive the market all the way through and say, nope, that's got to be the way. More people put money, more people value.
Believe that tokenized, that fractionalized version of the truth.
And it gets very dystopian very quickly. But I think it is a reason that this example at this moment in time hits a zeitgeist of the moment, because when I heard about it first, I heard about it through Kalshi. When my wife tells me about it, she heard about it on TikTok from the actual camera panning. I didn't even see that until after I had heard about this derivative market popping up. And I see those two worlds colliding, this real world influence. If you're the CEO of a company and you're supposed to be a leader, and you have clearly violated this social construct of what...
You violated a social smart contract.
Well said. Thank you very much. And now the internet is going to extract the value where it sees the truth, which is you should get fired. And that's the other thing, is the question is like, is he going to get fired? But the real question is, should he? Yes or no? That's what you're betting on. That's what you're betting on in this now smart contract, which will reward those who take the right side of that bet.
And when I think about that, it's now about saying, well, we're going to be adding a derivative to the old adage. The old adage was, well, there's his version of the truth, there's her version of the truth, and somewhere in between is the real truth. But now what we're saying is, there's his version of the truth, there's her version of the truth, and somewhere in the middle, there is a tokenized version of the truth that, depending on when you look at it, might be different depending on all the factors that we just described that are extenuating. And so now the truth layer is fungible. The truth layer is manipulatable. And if that's true, and if we all believe what the majority thinks, because remember, we elect presidents based on what the majority thinks. We pass bills in big rotunda rooms based on what a majority thinks. Then ipso facto, why would we not assign truth, of value to truth based on what the majority thinks? But the majority can be manipulated, as you just described. It's not just dystopian. It's to a point to where the importance of whether or not something actually is true is less than what you and I think should be the outcome. Like you said, it was perfect. It wasn't, well, that's not what the real outcome is. It's what is the social layer exists, the social contract. What do people think should happen? That's where they're betting.
Yeah.
And if everyone's betting with what they should happen, then that truth layer, in fact, should emulate generally the opinion of the majority of people.
Who can pay for it?
Who can pay for it?
Look,
as long as you have a smartphone, then your version of the truth is valuable.
You got a wallet.
Wallet.
iOS. I cannot believe the ability in this conversation. I'm so glad to be back with you in July.
It's so good to talk to you again. It's so fun.
Feel a little bit like day one to me. It does feel like a little bit of a rebirth happening. And with this new clarity, there will be new things that pop up. And I think what I've just described in both the acquisition strategy of these humans, in this public markets playing out in real time from a Coldplay concert, Apple now accepting Bitcoin, like all of it, you start to piece it together and you see that it is going to change the face of American economics, American business. Every industry will be disrupted. And it is right at this intersection of AI, blockchain, and the truth.
And the cryptocurrencies that fund all of that. And you know what I'll say, like for our listeners, because I think we just put a bow on it, is we all know Congress, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, August, I don't know what day it is in the beginning of August, but they basically go away. Everyone goes on that hiatus of sorts. So I'm looking for what legislation is going to be rammed through before the end of July, looking at those 5 p.m. on Fridays, on Sundays now that they love to do. And then August will be quiet. And I'm going to put a $2 bill out. We're going to hear about some aliens in August. We're going to hear about some non-stories that are stories. But then that September 2nd, I think, is the day after Memorial Day this year. And then everyone's back in session and we're going to start ripping again until Thanksgiving. So let's keep an eye out, and our listeners as well, for all the stuff that's going to get pressed past Crypto Week, but before the end of July. And get your money in the market while you can, because in August, man, who knows what's going to happen. In September, things are going to go absolutely upset. Just going to go parabolic, my prediction.
Let's do it again. We won't take another full month off for the summer, so we'll keep it rolling through July. We'll do it again.
Talk to you next week.
Peace.
Later.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. See you next time for more news and all things crypto and Web3.